Hello everyone, welcome to High Performance Computing Advanced Scientific Computing course, Lecture 10, Deep Sequence Models and Fluids. This is the outline of the course with CFD special, and this is the Lecture 10. Let's have a review on Lecture 9, which we talk about the computational fluid dynamics and the parallel computing, and we had some example to understand why we need the parallel computing and the CFD. We had some example from the turbulent flow in the nature and as well in the artificial application and in some daily life event and as well in the industry. We talk about this example, and because the flow usually is turbulent, so it's essential to understand this phenomena. However, because it's nonlinear, random, and very complex phenomena, it's still one of the challenge in the physics area and fluid dynamics. And many research are going on it to have a better understanding about the turbulence flow. Then we moved on the computational methods or numerical method is available for turbulence flow. Usually for turbulence flow, we have three well-known methods. It's called RANS, LES, and DNS. We talk about them in the lecture 9. RANS the most applicable in the industry and is provide the mean of the solution. LES provide a better solution than RANS with more accuracy. However, it's expensive than RANS. And the next one is the direct numerical simulation, which provide the exact solution. However, it's very costly, and it is not common to use it for industry application. Therefore, we understand here to have a numerical solution in the turbulence flow for LES and RANS especially, we need the parallel computing. We had a few examples, and we saw in some studies RANS could not provide the required solution, and we have to use LES and DNS, so the high performance computing is essential. Then we had a review on the topology, that we have a statics and dynamic network, and we present some of these network and what the advantage and disadvantage of them, and how we can use them in the CFD domain. Then we had the example from the parallel computing for a very simple domain for heat transfer in the CFD, and we presented how we can do decomposition on the domain, and we split subdomains between different processors and using the parallel computing to solve the problem. We as well talk about how we can calculate the required memory for a specific domain in the CFD. We presented the structure of the message passing interface MPI, which you know about it from the previous lecture, had talked by Maurice. And here we presented how you can use the MPI to run the CFD code. And in the final section of the course, we had the example from the turbulence flow from research study, and why in some problem it's essential to solve the problem via LES or DNS, and the parallel computing is required. Let's carry on about this lecture. In this lecture, we will have two parts. In first part, we'll talk about the fluids flow prediction, and then in the second part, we will talk about the deep sequence models and how we can apply these models in the fluid dynamic area. So this is the first part. To apply deep learning in fluid dynamics area, as we know, usually in the deep learning it's required to have a data to train the model. Usually we have data set and we split it into training data set, test data set, and sometimes validation as well. To do that, in fluid dynamic, we have data set usually from the numerical solution, RANS, LES, or DNS. And we can apply this data to train the model and solve the problem or predict the problem in a specified feature. For example, it could be velocity or vorticity. And also there is a data from the experiments sometimes. From the specific problem, there are some experiments and we have data sets from them. We can use this data to train the deep learning model and create a prediction. Usually the available data could be short-term or long-term data. It depends to the data that they are short or long-term. Is provide ability to make a prediction for the following period of the phenomena, that it could be feature of the velocity. Here in this slide you can see this is a figure of the application of the average flow fields at Reynolds 2000, which they use training data from Reynolds of with 1000. Regarding the sequential data, recurrent neural network, it's the fundamental of the sequential data. Usually in these network we are able to have some prediction for complex and nonlinear phenomena, and the application of neural network presented very good capability. However, when we have large data or we want to do prediction for longer data, it's suffering from vanishing gradient, and it's not possible to use it for long range of the temporal dependency. Shortly, because of the development in the deep learning network, we had the long short-term memory. It's called LSTM, which is overcome the problem of the vanishing gradient because of its structure. LSTM applies a gating structure to control the transit of the recurrent connector and can deal with the vanishing gradient issues. So with this LSTM model, we are able to have a longer time prediction with data set. And in the beginning, it's applied in many different areas. And the interest of this model came to the fluid dynamic area as well. So it is possible to use in the fluid dynamic area. We have some feature that they are time series, and we can apply this method, which is sequential, to have a prediction. However, in the fluid dynamic, we need to specify our data, how they matching the time series of the sequential data. We'll talk about that in the next section. And another network from the deep learning, which is another variant from the LSTM, is called gated recurrent unit. It's the next generation of the LSTM, which from the literature it seems it's working with fewer parameters than LSTM. Then its training rate is faster, It's important because usually in deep learning, one of the challenges is computing. When we need more data and with low training rate, so the computing is taking longer time and it will be costly. It seems Go from the literature has a better performance than LSTM. One of the main things because the forget gate and the input gate in the LSTM replaced with only one update gate. And the literature reported with these properties of the GRU, it's working with similar performance to the LSTM. One of the recent examples in the energy, it's application of the GRU to forecasting the wind speed, and then they can predict the electricity demand. From this a short review about the LSTM and GRU that you have, we had lecture for sequential data, and you had many detail about these type of model. Here only we going through them shortly and to show how we can use them for the fluid dynamic application. Regarding the LSTM and GRU, as we said, they are sequential models. So when we are talking about the fluid dynamics, we need to provide sequential data to use the data set with these methods. In fluid dynamic, we have two framework or view of the measurement. It's called Eulerian and Lagrangian. In the Lagrangian view, we are following a particle fluid in the flow. Then for every single time, we have a specific location of the particle of the fluid, and also velocity, which if the measurement performed in two dimension, we have in x and y, and if it's 3 dimension, we have 3 components for the velocity and 3 location in 3 direction of the coordinate. Because every of these available measurement will be in a specific time, so we have time series of the data for a particle fluid, and we can apply this type of the data as a time series with LSTM and GRU models. Recently, we applied LSTM and GRU with the data from fluid dynamics to make a comparison between these two methods, because in the literature it's said that GRU is faster and working with fewer data and providing results similar to LSTM. In this application, we had data from turbulence flow, and I will talk about the detail in the part 2 of this lecture when we talk about the practical application of the LSTM. But here is the short description. The turbulence flow created in the experiment. The flow was with deformation, and it make the turbulence flow has an extra strain rate. So there was a strain turbulence flow which has a many different parameter, and because it was an experiment, there was the presence of the gravity. So we have many different effective parameters: strain rate, gravity, and the Reynolds number, which make the flow non-linear and random. To make this prediction and apply LSTM, we create time series of the velocity based of the Lagrangian view. That means in the sequence we had velocity from every single time measurement. Regarding the capability of deep learning, as we know from the literature, it's extracting the hidden feature from these different layers that we are designing in deep learning model. So there is a great capability. Then in this model, we only applied only one feature, the velocity, as an input in time series manner. We use the training one time with 60% and 40% test data, and second time we applied 80% training data and 20% test data. We applied LSTM and Go both for this consideration. For 80%, Go implemented 8 to 12% faster than LSTM, and with 60%, which is mean less training data, is performed 5 to 10% faster than LSTM model. Then with application of these two models, it seems GRU can provide faster model and training. However, we suggested with larger data, this comparison should be done, because with larger data, it's expected to see more difference if it's faster. So the 12%, for example, faster for training with 1 day, the 10% it will be few hours. Then it's seems we can apply GRU for larger data with faster training, and this is really advantage of this method. In this method, we applied on the parallel computing simulation, and the performance and the result was satisfied with measurement of the mean absolute error and R2 score, which R2 score was higher than 0.97, which is really good measurement and result for this simulation. But again, we should mention that deep learning in this LSTM has a great capability that only with one feature can predict the next period time, which it means we don't need doing purposing on the available measurement of our data. And here the question, how we can create the sequential data from fluid dynamics. As we said, we have the LSTM and Go, and how we need to design the model. If we have experiment, so we have some measurement and data, we can use it. As well, in the industry and the application of the fluid, there are many devices can measure the velocity, like pitot tube or hot wire, and we can have a measurement in the Lagrangian view. As well, from the advanced technique, we can have particle tracking velocity method to have a data in time series which is following a particle fluid, and we can have raw data. With raw data, we can make a model and determine the flow feature. One of the advantage of this method, it's without purposing on the data. That means we have the data from the measurement. We assume we have velocity vector and its time series, so we don't need doing any purposing on the data. Just use this time series of the velocity partially for training and the rest of the data for the test data. And this velocity measurement is available from many numerical solutions and as well from the industry measurement. Regarding the capability of machine learning or deep learning in fluid dynamic area, indeed from a few years ago it started, and the investigation and some application presented, there are some good perspective of the application of the deep learning in a fluid dynamic area, especially about the turbulence flow, since it's random and linear phenomena and its high dimensionality, which we said is a major challenge in the recent century in the physics. But it's hopefully from the machine learning and deep learning we can have a longer prediction or longer data from the turbulent flow, and we can understand these phenomena better than before. Regarding the application of the machine learning, as we said, it's has some hope that could be solved the turbulence flow, because in the laminar flow we have usually a good numerical and analytical solution, so we are good. But for the turbulence flow we cannot solve every problem, and we said from the numerical solution we have RANS, LES and DNS. However, we are limited to applying this method. Here this example in this slide, it's presenting the difference between Reynolds average Navier-Stokes method, large eddy simulation and direct numerical solution, and we can see how they are different in the details, and we talked about this before. So because of this limitation and obstacle, we hope with application of the deep learning we can overcome on this some obstacle to have a solution for the turbulence flow. Regarding the application of the deep learning, here we can have some turbulent flow story. Usually the turbulent flow studying more than 100 years currently, and there are some understanding about these phenomena. The last one is the Kolmogorov hypothesis, which presented a specific structure of this phenomenon. However, this hypothesis could not cover all range of the scales in the turbulence flow, but it's helping to solving on the specific range. Here I want to mention this quote from Peter Ustinov, when he said, "We used to have lots of the question to which there were no answers. Now with computer there are lots of answers to which we have not thought of the questions." These point to available capability of parallel computing and high-performance computing. Maybe there are still many problem and complex features in the fluid dynamics. However, with available capability of the parallel computing, we can solve many of the problems. We can solve LES, or sometimes DNS for research study for a small scale. We can apply that, and we can understand the turbulent flow better. So this idea regarding applying the capability of the computer and high-performance computing to understand, it's leading to application of the parallel computing, which we can apply computer power to understand detail of the turbulence flow better than before. However, here I presenting you these a quote from two scientists in physics and fluid dynamics. Still, we can say the turbulence flow is unsolved problem. Richard Feynman said turbulence is the most important unsolved problem of classical physics. And Kolmogorov theory in 1941 presented his hypothesis, which is mostly covering the main field of the theory. From recent studies and recent perspective, it seems to understand the turbulence flow, we need to have these three sections together. We need the theory, we need the experiment, and we need the simulation. And the simulation could be performed via parallel computing because the problem is non-linear and complex. Therefore, the deep learning and machine learning application, it's included in this area, and we can apply it with help of the experiment and simulation and theory and understand the structure of the turbulence flow. Here are a few examples of the complex problem of the turbulence flow that we have in the universe. In these figures here, we can see these are coronal flux loop arc up from the photosphere. These phenomena, it's indeed very complex, and the scale of these, we call it usually, we can say vortex. It's a very large scale. You assume if it's happening around any star, or we assume the sun. So scale it's here is too large, and understanding of these phenomena, it's very complex, and to simulate it with computer, of course, it's required very costly computing. This is another example. The turbulence scale vortices on the upper surface of the delta wing aircraft. You can see this view of the turbulence flow and how we have a very different scale of the flow, which is you can see the question here: how can we design an aircraft without a knowledge of the turbulence? Recently, you see every year or every few years we have some development and improving in the aircraft industry. This is with development in the turbulent flow. When we understand this phenomena better, we can design the aircraft better, with which leads to better performance and safety as well. These two pictures when its flow pass a sphere with different Reynolds number. This one with Reynolds number 2 times 10 to 4, and this one 2 times 10 to 5. We can see with higher Reynolds number the turbulence flow in the back side of the sphere, it's look like completely different with this one. So when the this is effect of the turbulence, and this is the reason we say we need to study to understand what the benefit and what the disadvantage of this phenomenon. Sometimes turbulence flow could be used as a tools. For example, when we want to do mixing with two fluids, turbulence can make the mixing rate faster, and as well about the separation behind the object. Sometimes we make it turbulence because it's better performance when leading with the separation. And this is an example of the Leonardo famous sketch when he plotted, and it seems from that time he understood the scale and different scale of the turbulence area. And the last figure is a side image of the Jupiter. Since Jupiter is a planet composed of the gases, here it's presenting the complex structure of these planets and the numerical simulation of the Jupiter, how it could be performed, which of course required in this scale to apply the parallel computing. Part 1 of the lecture finished here, and this is the last slide. Here you have this video, and you can find it in the reference of the lecture. It's presenting the application of the neural network to modeling the liquid splash, and you can watch it. After a short break, we will back and we will continue for the second part of the lecture.